Hello and welcome. My name is Phil Naylor, and welcome to Tea with a Therapist. This is session 11, and it happens to be St. Patrick's Day, so happy St. Patrick's Day. I've got some Irish tea with me today. Notice I'm wearing the required green. So, anyway, thank you for joining me. As I said, my name is Phil Naylor. I'm a psychotherapist and hypnotherapist, and I'm in private practice in psychotherapy. I've been doing psychotherapy for quite some time, at least 20 years, and plus other related stuff even prior to that. So today's topic is on change and how to facilitate change, basically in ourselves. This is kind of building on last week's theme of change because 'tis the time of year, St. Patrick's Day. Just shortly in a few days is going to be the spring equinox, which is the first day of spring. So the seasons are changing, and the light half is starting to overtake the dark half. So light is coming in, and the old season of cold and snow is moving out, and the new season of growth and regeneration is coming in. So it's always a festive time, and that's why I often think of St. Patrick's Day as more of a spring celebration. So anyway, these topics, as I usually say, are my attempt to just kind of put ideas about mental health, mental well-being, our psychological makeup, and just all things psychological for topics of discussion. Just kind of sharing my perspective, my particular knowledge and viewpoints that I've gathered about psychotherapy and psychological change and all those subjects. Some of these are sort of would be very traditional perspectives, and others are perspectives that I've kind of picked up along the way and my own conclusions that have been drawn. So just to clarify that this isn't psychotherapy, this is information and education. So, but please just grab a tea and just join me. Just pour a wee cup of tea and just join me for a few minutes of reflection today about, as I said, about change. So, about changing ourselves, because most people come to me to psychotherapy when they need to change something. So, they have something that they can't get out of, like depression or anxiety or obsessive thinking or whatever it is. Or they may have a situation that they're having trouble dealing with that they need some help to sort out. And actually, when people bring a situation, that usually means that there's something about themselves they need to change in order to sort that situation, because working in it the ways they've been trying to come at it haven't been working. And usually it all folds back to yourself. And what are you doing, and what do you need to change within yourself in order to change the situation? So to be an attitude, a perspective, a point of view, all those sorts of things. So when I help people make changes, usually what we're trying to change, when it really boils down to it, is a state of being. So if you think about depression, for example, or anxiety, which are the commonest things that people bring to get help with. When you think about it, they're a state of being. So a depressive state, and states involve kind of a feeling state, as a perceptual state, and sort of a set of thoughts that kind of go along with that. So if we think about depression, for example, so the state would be feelings of sadness, feelings of hopelessness. That would be kind of some of the feeling states that go with depression. The perceptual state may be that they're stuck and trapped in their situation, and there's no way out, and they can just give up, and they're just, they don't have the ability to change or manage their situation. Anxiety is a state of fear. The feeling state is fear, and the perceptual state is that something usually is something could happen that they don't want, can't handle, or don't have the resources to manage. So that's where the what if thinking. What if this thing happens? What if I lose my job? What what if my spouse leaves, or what if I mess up on this thing, or what if I go to that party and nobody talks to me, or they judge me, or something like that. So there's some sort of idea that creates this fear, and those are the kinds of thoughts, the what if thoughts, that kind of go along with that particular state. So when we're looking at shifting a state. So people are stuck in a way of being that they don't like, or they're stuck either stuck continually in that state, or they frequently experience it and want to experience that state less. So that's often what psychotherapists are doing, is helping people change states. So there's two ways, if you boil it all down, there's two fundamental ways to change states, and one is from the outside, externally, and the other is from the inside, internally. So what do I mean by externally? Those would be things I would include, like changing the environment or changing your physiology. So if we think of every state we have as having a physiological and a psychological component. So anxiety, for example, and I think I mentioned this before, has both a physiological component. So when we experience anxiety, there's tightness, there's butterflies in the stomach maybe, there's some people get lightheaded, their heart rate increases, tight and shallow breathing. So there's a physiological state goes with that, as well as the psychological state of what if this happens, and what if that happens, and a point of view, and perceiving the world in a certain way. And so when we work with a state, we need to look at changing the physiological components as well as the psychological components, or the external as well as the internal components. And when I help people change states, I say we kind of need to do both, or one or the other, or both. Often people kind of tend towards one way or the other. So what I mean by external change, it would be things like changing your environment. Okay, so these are the common sense things people that often do. Get out of your setting. You're sitting there all depressed, get up, go for a walk, go shopping, go talk to a friend, go see a movie, just go for a walk in the woods. Do something that gets you out of your environment. So simple things, just changing that. Or sometimes there's this whole movement about, simplifying and organizing. There's something about, cleaning up your space, organizing your space, that has some psychological impact. You feel better. You feel kind of less oppressed and overwhelmed by just having a clean space. So tidying up your space, that's an external thing that we can do. So changing your immediate environment, doing something different, even going to get something to eat. Now, this is where we kind of start to run into some problems about, changing our external state as a way of changing our internal state. Because the next part involves physiology. And I often say that the fastest, most immediate effective ways to change our immediate state is to change our physiology. So there's simple things that we can do, changing your breathing, getting up and doing some exercise. There's a EFT, there's a funny thing that I'll probably talk about at some point called body tapping, where we tap on things, and there's a sort of kind of process that you go through when you're stuck in a state that you're tapping. So you're tapping on your body, and you're doing these physiological things. So we change our physiological state. So I often coach people that if you're stuck in a state, start by doing something to shift your physiology, shift your environment. That's the fastest way that you can kind of get out of it. And then follow that by changing your internal state. You start to then shift your thoughts and perspectives. We'll talk about that in a moment. But usually physical, external, followed by shift in internal. And those two things combine. The things about the external things is that they're kind of short and effective and immediate, but tend to not be long lasting. And whereas changing internal, which is basically changing your thoughts and your ideas and your perceptions, take longer, but actually provide the most permanent kind of change. So we want to kind of leverage both of those things to create change. So what are some of the other physiological things that people do to change their state? Well, one of the things, if you go to your doctor and you have anxiety or depression, what is he going to do? He's going to give you a pill. What's the pill doing? It's changing your physiological state. There's an external input, changes your physiology on some level, and thus starts to change your state. What do other people do? What are easy ways for people to change their states? Are often our bad habits. We'll have a drink, smoke some marijuana, take some drugs, or we go for the food thing. Let's go get a pizza and lots of sweets. And there's actually nothing wrong with all these things in short durations. Nothing wrong with having the occasional drink or having a glass of wine to unwind once in a while, or go get the pizza and let's celebrate with some food, or I'm going to have some chocolate. So those are ways of changing our physiology. But those are easy things to kind of get dependencies on, that we kind of use them too frequently because they're very easy. It's easy to grab a drink and change how you're feeling, right? It's easy to grab some chocolate and that. But again, short-lived, right? So we have a temporary change of state, but it doesn't last that long. It just takes as long as that kind of whatever we did, drank or ate or whatever, kind of lasts, and then we're kind of back to it again. And because they're easy, that we can go to them frequently. So people will sort of say, well, that worked. I'll keep doing more of that. So I'll keep drinking some more. I'll keep smoking more marijuana. I'll keep eating more food. So that's where we get into bad habits. And then they need to be changed, right? So I don't recommend kind of using those sorts of methods to change your change your internal state by going to sort of substances. Okay, but that is the trap. That's in our society, addictions and substance use is a big problem, and that's why it's easy to change our states. And it doesn't also solve the problem in any kind of long-term way that we're trying to resolve by using that thing. But we can use positive things like changing our breathing, doing tapping, changing our physiology. Sometimes when you're depressed and you're looking down, just standing up, putting shoulders back, widening your viewpoint, looking like you're confident. There's a whole kind of thing called NLP that is about, changing our physiological states and acting, putting yourself in the physiological state that's opposite to the one that you have been in. So if you're depressed and looking down, you're standing up, and say there's the power poses. You imagine you're pretending like Superman or Wonder Woman. You're standing there, shoulders back, feet apart, looking strong, looking out, and all those things. And if you hold that for a few minutes, you start to feel different. So there's lots of tricks that you can do in a positive way that help us shift out of an immediate state. And then but then to make the shift more powerful and permanent, we need to use our minds and internal state. And sometimes the mistake, I think, of psychotherapy is that it focuses on just changing our minds, trying to change our way of thinking and our viewpoints without focusing on the physiological. I like to combine those two things to make it more powerful, change the external and then the internal, using them both together. And if we want to change our immediate state, I recommend first changing something physiological and then shifting to changing something psychological, as simple as shifting to a positive thought. So sometimes I recommend a technique of thought shifting, thought stopping and thought shifting, whereas if we're in some negative chain of thought or what ifs and, oh, how hopeless my situation is, and you catch yourself doing that, you first have to stop that. So you imagine like a stop sign, stop, inside you say stop. And then you have a determined positive thought. It could be usually a past experience of something that you've done or experience that was really great. You had this really great moment. You may be on vacation, you're walking on the beach, it was great, or at this, or you had some situation where you felt really good, maybe at a graduation, you felt, oh, this is wonderful, I'm getting my degree and I'm wonderful, or whatever it is, whatever experience that you have had that at that time was really wonderful, and it's easy to remember, and when you think about it, it makes you feel really good. So you kind of pre-designate that particular thought. And so when you do your thought stopping, you shift from those negative thought patterns into this positive thought. And your goal is to hold that positive thought for 15 seconds uninterrupted by any other negative thinking. And so sometimes if you're really in a bad place, you can't even make 15 seconds, maybe a couple of seconds. And you keep stretching, you keep kind of moving on to shifting onto a positive thought until you can hold that positive thought for 15 seconds. And then we can expand how long you can hold a positive thought for by then running a sequence of positive images. So you can write down a whole bunch of things that you've experienced in the past that felt really good, and then you go down that list of positive thoughts, holding each for 15 seconds. So you go from thought A, hold that for 15 seconds, move to thought B, 15 seconds. So we then are training our minds to be able to sort of be controlled, that we can actually stop thinking about a negative thing and start thinking about a positive thing, and have a duration of holding that thing. And so we start to learn how to shift our thinking. So if we combine thought stopping and shifting our thoughts with a physical change, that we change our breathing, we do some tapping, or we just get up and go for a walk or get out of the environment, and we do those two things together. First, the physical thing, the external thing, and secondly, by shifting the internal, those two things together are more effective than each one individually. And then, of course, over the longer term, it's often where we use psychotherapy for, is to shift our perceptions, our ideas about things that then result in a kind of more permanent kind of shift. So if we have a perception, for example, that whatever it is that we're dealing with is overwhelming, and so that's our perceptual shift. And as long as we see it as overwhelming, we can do all these shifts about physiology and all that, and they can last a short time, but we're forced to come back to that situation again that feels overwhelming. And so the way we work psychologically is to shift that idea that this situation is overwhelming to, no, this is totally doable. So when we shift to a place of, oh, this is totally doable, that can totally take away our anxiety. Because if you're faced with, oh, I've got to do this thing, I've got to get up in front of these people and talk, and that's freaking you out, as long as you have to get up and do that, talk in front of those people, and that's still facing you. You can do all the tricks in the world, but you got that situation coming, and you got to deal with that, and how you're going to get through it. But if you shift your belief and perception that this is overwhelming and I can't do it, to, oh no, I can do it. Hey, this is how I have to look at it. I'm not being evaluated by this group of people. I'm actually just providing information. So as you provide information, that's the focus. Then you start to, and I know this stuff, and so then it starts to become shift to, this is totally doable. So as long as we have a certain perception that's stuck, see, that's a fundamental thing that needs to change, the perception, because perception drives everything behind it. Because so if you're sitting in your living room and you hear this big crash outside and somebody says, oh, somebody just hit your car, and you're going to go, what? Oh my God, and so all of a sudden you've got this physiological react, you're freaking out, somebody hit my car. But then if they said, oh no, somebody just hit some garbage cans out there, and then it's like, oh, yeah. So so your perceptions shift instantly, and that can instantly shift how you feel and perceive about the situation. And so we work at those perceptual shifts, because as long as you see it one way, things feel terrible until we shift it where it seems totally, this is a non-issue, or I never looked at it like that, or this is easy now. When it shifts to that, then everything changes. But in the short term, to get there, we might need stage. So that might be a practice thing, and it might be a longer term thing of gradually working out how you can shift your thoughts. But in the short term, changing the external situation, changing our physiology, and then shifting our thought patterns can kind of snap us out of a sort of the state for the time being, a depressive state, anxious state, whatever state we're in, it can shift us out of that. And then we can work on, so if we look at a state of being like depression or anxiety that we've been doing in a long time, we can look at that as a habit, a habitual state of how we're looking at the world and how we're physiologically responding to it. And then we start to habit change into a different way, into a new habit. And that takes a little bit more practice. So we have to keep practicing shifting out of depression, anxiety into a more empowering state. And the more we do that, the more habitual that becomes, and the more we work at that in terms of shifting the whole perception, that's when we move into a longer term change. Okay? So that's sort of therapy in a nutshell, I guess. That's what we're trying to do. That's how I work anyway. That's kind of how I help people to shift and make changes. One of the tricks, anyway. External and internal. Those two together can be very powerful and work together very well. So anyway, so that's my thought of the day at the season of change, as we're changing from one season to another. This is how change happens. This is one way to make change happen. So I hope this has been helpful and interesting for you. I'll let you go to enjoy your St. Patrick's Day, and don't change their physiological state too much, because we do know St. Patrick's Day is known for changing states in a particular way, usually with some sort of alcohol. So, one final thought. Holidays, that's an external change, right? Something happens, let's do something different. Let's focus on this aspect. It changes our focal point to something new and different. You know, St. Patrick's Day, green and spring and fun and all those sorts of things. So holidays can serve a purpose because they help us kind of get out of our old mode of thinking and to focus on something else and take a break from our routines. So holidays themselves are a way of changing our state of mind if we use it the right way. So like I say, watch the indulgence. Don't want to change your state too much, too hard, and in too deep a way too quickly. Okay, so but have fun and enjoy St. Patrick's Day. Thank you, and until next week, enjoy changing yourself through these little tips. Thank you.